During this week, as I spoke with many, many people in a variety of places, the recurring theme was sadness. Sadness upon sadness in hearing of the death of John. Story after story I heard of his engagement with people. The reason why I chose the verses from For the Beauty of the Earth is because of John's relationship with others. His relationship primarily with his wife and his children, his family, his friends, his colleagues, the people of Marquette. If you listen to the words of For the Beauty of the Earth, it talks about human love, brother, sister, parent, child. John's sense of the spiritual was focused on that love of other. First and foremost in his home. First and foremost with his wife and his children. And those dogs. Those damn dogs. You could tell he was a special man to have taken in those big dogs. I went to the house the other day to sit with the family and make arrangements, and all of a sudden they descended upon me. My trousers were wet from them drooling on me. But to John, they were like part of the family. They were part of the family. There's a photograph of John that Sandy showed me, or Shelby, I can't remember who, but it's an old-fashioned, square photograph, and here's John with this big dog, literally up on his shoulders, like hugging him. Again, I think it's a reflection of who John was. The understanding that it wasn't just family and friends and colleagues, but it was also his love for nature and for dogs. Big dogs. And I'm not talking about government officials. This, to me, indicates a man whose soul was grounded in an understanding of relationship as key to how one celebrates life. The sky, the stars, the activities with his family on outings, places he wanted to go, they're going to go to, places he went to. Celebrating now, here and now, the beauty of the earth. We need to remember that as part of who he was. When we look at spirituality, his spirituality was now. He lived in the moment and celebrated the now each and every day to its fullest. And there's a message in that from him. We could do well to do likewise. Too often, really important things are missed because we're not paying attention to the now. I think also the second reading from Ecclesiastes helps us to understand that there's a season for everything. That it's just not this time of year or that time of year or what we're doing and how we're doing it, but the reality that it comes if we like it or not. There's a time to live and there is a time to die. In this instance, John died, and we are well aware of it. But that is not the focus, especially how he died. The focus is more important is how did he live? As I said previously, he lived in the moment now. It's a great spirituality of a humanistic existentialism. Oh, I forgot something. You have to forgive me. This is how I preach. And I don't use notes. I've had this for years. I'm working at my desk at home, I've been working on this message for hours. And I ran across this and I went, oh, John would like this. This is from William James, the first chair of psychology at Harvard. I believe myself to be probably permanently incapable of believing the Christian scheme of vicarious salvation. The ground I am taking is this: the mother sea and fountainhead of all religions lies in the mystical experiences of the individual. Taking the word mystical in a very wide sense, all theologies and all ecclesiasticisms are secondary growths superimposed. Again, it lies in the mystical experiences of the individual. This is what this man accomplished. To recognize in the individual, if it was somebody he was talking to about elections and campaigns, if it was his friend, his family, he recognized the importance of the individual, the spirit of the individual, and therefore he celebrated that spark of life. That is wonderful. He and I had the opportunity of being together last year. The year before, I was the officiant at his mother's funeral. We're at the cemetery, and he says to me, would you like to do an invocation for the opening of the session of the House? And I'm like, sure. I had no idea what that meant. None. I said, oh, good, okay, fine. A year later, where's Nick's here, isn't he? There's Nick. Nick was his, what were you called? What is your aide? He was an aide to the representative. And this young man calls me, this very young voice, and he says, would you like to do the invocation for the opening of the House of Representatives on June 8th? And I'm like, who are you? Is time so desperate in Lansing, we're hiring 12-year-olds. I'll send John a check. So Nick and I arrange it so that we are capable, I'm able to do it. So I go down to the Capitol. My two daughters accompanied me. And one of them is a rabid Democrat. She's working for the National Democratic Party now in Atlanta, Georgia, with the 6th Congressional District. And she and John had this wonderful conversation, very, very animated conversation about whatever. I know nothing about politics. So there's a picture of John and I in the chambers. Is my favorite. What's that? It's on the slideshow. And we're both seated at the desk of representatives, and I'm doing this, pointing up somewhere, and it was that perfect John Kivela smile. And he's looking at me, and I'm pointing up, and somebody said, what are you pointing to? I said, oh, it's nothing glamorous. I'm pointing to the tally board of the House. And they went, oh, we thought you were making some profound statement. I said, oh, no. John and I were just talking about the restoration of the chamber. But if you see his face, as Nick, I don't know who did it, somebody from the staff who took these pictures, it is one of my favorite pictures of John and I. There are others with the Speaker of the House and up on the dais, and it's all very nice. But that picture, of all pictures, to me demonstrates an ability of John to be able to make me feel comfortable and important. And he was happy I was there. Here I am, a minister from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and he said to me, I don't know if you told me or John told me, you don't get paid. There are no travel costs, no accommodation reimbursement. There's not a stipend. And I went, I'm a minister. We all do stipends. And it was, I didn't even want the stipend. It was so much fun being with him, having myself, by the Sergeant of Arms, I think it is, took me up with the representative. We met the Speaker of the House at the steps of the dais. And there I was doing my invocation, representing the citizens of the Upper Peninsula, all of us, with our representative, John Kivela. This is a demonstration to me of a person who has the ability to engage individuals. And we both like to talk. So, again, I want to go back to Ecclesiastes. There is a time for everything. Perhaps this time is far too short. But think about what he did. Think about how he loved. Think about how he legislated. Is that a right word? Legislated? Nick? Is that okay? Okay. So, from the perspective of spirituality, as a spiritual care provider, John's experience of spirituality as lived in the moment, lived in the mystery, lived by the heart, we couldn't have asked for more. He couldn't have asked for more. It was just him, the uniqueness of him. And in doing that, what he did so well, many people were touched. So, good and faithful servant, you have done well. It is now time to rest. Amen.
Oh, I am both heartbroken and honored to be standing before you, putting together my dad's story in a way to make people feel the real John Kivela is a terribly daunting task. Many people know him as a leader of community, as the champion of the UP, but to those closest to him, we knew that he was really just a goofball who made too many inappropriate jokes, was always covered in dog hair, and loved deeper than most humans are capable of. It only seems fitting to start from the beginning with the stories of his childhood, with his brother and 2 sisters and cousins who were raised in Deer Track Village. All of the children who lived there, can I raise this up a little bit?
Yeah. Doesn't it work? Yeah.
No, it does. I just feel like I'm bending. Okay. All the children who lived there were part of the DTDA, the Deer Track Detective Agency, a society put together by a neighbor woman who wanted the kids to report any suspicious activity in the area. One summer, my dad and his best friend Brad drained the man-made pond in Deer Track, which left all of the fish in the bottom to die. My mom wanted me to leave this story out because he was on the Natural Resource Committee. But I like it. My Uncle Kevin, the baby of the family, was recruited by the neighbor to take on the task as the lead investigator on the case of who drained the pond. She offered him $5 to work on the case. However, it was mostly a bribe to get him to rat on his big brother. Everyone knew it was John who did it, but the DTDA continued to report that their investigation was inconclusive, and Kevin collected about $15 that summer, so. As they grew up, my dad and his sister Chris, self-proclaimed blonde-haired twins, there's a picture of that on the slideshow too, they would take the bus to their dad's automotive shop, where they'd work until their lunch break, and then they'd use their 30 minutes to run to the blood bank, where they'd race through their donation knowing they only had 30 minutes to get their pint of blood. They'd pump their fists and eye each other's bags, filling up, always accelerating the competition of who could finish their donation fastest. My dad continued to be a regular blood donor for the rest of his life. He and my mom would go, they'd take me and my brother, and we'd love the snacks. And then when I turned 18, he took me for the first time to be a blood donor. When I was a young girl, I'd watch my dad in our garage in complete awe as I watched him what I perceived to be completing like a 3D jigsaw puzzle, but was in fact a car engine. He told me that he had built his own motorcycle when he was only 16, and that he could take an engine apart and put it back together without a manual. I truly felt that he must be smarter than a brain surgeon to know how to operate on what felt like unlimited numbers of makes and models of vehicles. He used these skills with so much pride as he worked for his dad, Bruce, and Sandy, and alongside his siblings, Rob and Wendy, at Market Automotive. He always came home from work with thick, calloused fingers, dirty fingernails, a pair of splotchy steel-toed boots, and that lingering smell of motor oil, all characteristics that I just associated with all dads. I just thought all dads smelled like that. It just was mine. Later, he became the general manager of John Zotto. He was proud to claim the months that he had hit the statistics of being the highest selling used car salesman in the Upper Peninsula, and he would brag about all of the older women who were charmed by his boyish smile. Like, seriously. But his true pride came in the pranks that he pulled on his coworkers. He was so giddy to come home. Oh my gosh. If you knew how my brother could laugh, he would just want to make my brother laugh, I swear. We'd sit in front of the fireplace and he'd tell us how he had super glued parts of somebody's pen together and just like watched with a straight face as they couldn't use it. He talked about throwing somebody's, this was before it was on The Office, I swear. He put someone's phone in the phone ceilings and then was calling it nonchalantly and like watching the person freak out looking for their phone. One of my favorites was he had told JC, John Christensen, that he was going to pay off some golf debts that he had acquired in cold, hard cash. And then he literally took a plethora of dollar bills, dipped them in water, and froze them, and handed them the frozen bills. And he was just dying thinking of JC having to put the money like in a tumble dryer to get them to thaw out. This was the biggest part of who John Kivela was. He was a bullshitter, he was a prankster, and he was a man who loved to laugh with others. His public service started as a time when he was a local businessman who wanted to integrate with our community. He was so proud to be a Rotarian, even agreeing to open our home to an exchange student from India for several months. How do we know? Yeah. Some people know how that went. Countless other organizations took his interest, and eventually from that public service was he inspired to join the Zoning Board of Appeals in Marquette. This specifically sticks in my memory because it changed the normal weekend flow in the Kivela house. We often refer to Kivela Sundays growing up. It was a day that started with someone fetching the mining journal while my dad cooked a big breakfast for the family and my mom began sipping her coffee. My dad would read the headlines, and my mom would rifle through the advertisements while my brother and I fought over who could read the Sunday comics first. It was usually a person who went and got the mail. There would be a period of time where we'd get on the living room floor and play tug of war or just snuggle with our beloved dog, Max. After this intimate family time, the day usually carried on with a hike in the woods or a swim at Wetmore's Landing Beach, followed by a mandatory trip to Menards for my dad, and ending with my father cooking an incredible meal while the Packers played in the background. When my dad joined the zoning board and then the city commission, and eventually mayor through that, this dynamic didn't really change, but his focus did. Our routine began to include getting in the car after our coffee and driving to the places that he would later vote on. We look at property lines in person, drive to intersections, and stand on the corner and imagine what would be positively and negatively affected by subtle changes that he was going to eventually vote on. There's a specific memory I have sitting in the back of my parents' car, and it was because there was about to be a vote held whether we should change a street name in Marquette. The reason we were driving up and down the street was because my dad wanted to count every single house that would have to change their address if we changed the name of the street. He was thinking about the people inside the houses individually more than just the name of the street and what it would mean to the person it was going to be honored in. These were the things that were magical about my dad, and I saw early in his political career that convinced me that he was going to make an amazing representative for our corner of Michigan, and I was right. I will leave the highlights of his time as our representative to his good friend, roommate, and colleague in Lansing, Senator Knezek. But I will briefly touch on my most meaningful memory of his political career, the time we called ourselves Team Kivela and won the initial Democratic primary that would lead him to his career as a state representative for the 109th District. Team Kivela was a makeshift group of people the few who believed my dad could win. His nieces and cousins showed up to make phone calls with us, march in parades, strategize at cookouts, and spend a summer walking around in red shirts that bore our own name in big white letters. Many of my dad's closest friends, Republicans, reached out to anyone who would listen, telling them to trust this Finnish Democrat to put aside party politics and get real work done for our community. I remember a night with my roommate making phone calls, and she was asked by a constituent, "Why are you just this young girl taking your time to support this man?" My friend responded that my dad had made her dinner countless times and helped her buy her first car, and she didn't even know much about his politics, but just believed that he was a genuinely good person who would make the best decisions he could for our community. Needless to say, that vote got locked down, and several more that same evening. That election encapsulated everything that my dad was: the hardest worker I ever knew, a man who would talk anyone regardless of circumstance, and a man who wouldn't take "you'll never win" for an answer. Two of the highlights of my dad's time in Lansing were when he got to bring his now late mother Pat, and just this year his sister Pam and our Uncle Mo, to visit while he was sworn into office. Before each visit, he would talk nonstop. He was really good at that. So he talked to me, but he was also probably talking to my mom and anyone else who would listen about how much it meant to him that they were going to come down. Just tell us what he was going to do with them and just how excited he was. It meant so much that the people that he loved most were willing to take his long commute down just to see where he worked. These trips meant everything to him and left him with so much pride you'll never know. My dad's public service and dedication to the Upper Peninsula was of high value to him, but he never missed an opportunity to make it clear who his three favorite constituents were. That was easy. The day after my dad died, I found this letter while sifting through old photographs, and I believe it says it all. It says, "One sunny Saturday, July 15th, 1989, that's my parents' anniversary, and it's in his handwriting, which is so cool to see. And it reads, "You were my first love all my life. Though I met you only halfway through it, I fell in love before I knew your name. I wanted to be your husband before our first date was over. My dream came true when you said yes, and I do. You held my hand and carried me through my darkest hour, only to reward me with the two greatest gifts I could have imagined. As our life has become more fun and full of love over the years, I attribute it to you, my first and only ever true love. I love you forever, unconditionally, John." My father married my mother at the gazebo on Presque Isle on the exact 1-year anniversary of their first date, a dinner served at a high top at Van Gogh's. They honeymooned on Mackinac Island, where they changed their names to Artur and Celeste to be incognito, because he was a big deal at the time. I don't know. And we've heard so many jokes about how they almost divorced while riding a tandem bicycle around the island, although it's still really unclear of who the lazier peddler was. My mom took a gamble on a 19-year-old boy who drove a $500 car, and he spent the rest of his life making sure she knew everything he did was for her. My brother and I spent our lives groaning and rolling our eyes as they kissed and danced in the kitchen, or as my dad would compliment my mother's assets right in front of us. We kept up the charade that we hated it, but we really knew deep down that they were setting an example of how love should really look. He loved surprising her with creative Christmas gifts and renovating sections of the house quickly if she ever left town. The best surprise was when he recreated their wedding day for their 25th anniversary. Every detail was just right. My father had my mother's original wedding dress restored. My cousin Ashley, the original flower girl, recreated an outfit to match the one she wore on the wedding day in 1989. That's why if you see that picture and you're wondering why there's a tall girl wearing a goofy outfit, there we go. There was a hula hoop competition at the reception, just like the one my Aunt Jean had notoriously won 25 years prior. And my father gifted my mother a beautiful string of pearls, the one she's wearing today, as a replacement for the plastic ones she wore on their original wedding day. My mother was convinced to get into her dress and have her hair done for what my dad explained as a recreation photo shoot as a gift to her. When he and my mom were pulling up to the gazebo, my mom said, "It looks like there's already a wedding going on here. We can't do this." But my dad assured her, "We are more important, and we will not get in the way." My mom got out of her red Jeep and quickly noticed the crowd at the gazebo was not just some wedding, but her closest friends and family. She began crying. My dad got down on one knee and proposed to her all over again. My parents' original maid of honor and best man walked down the aisle, and my brother and I wore matching outfits with the wedding party as we surrounded my parents, and they reprofessed their love and commitment. It was one of the most beautiful days of my life. But I had to hear a lot of our married friends groan because my father had set a precedent no one will ever surpass. My dad made it clear to everyone that he would never seek an office that would take him away from his precious weekends in Marquette. He loved his job, but he loved coming home to my mom and spending the weekend cooking and hiking with her and their herd of St. Bernards most of all. My dad was a loving husband and father. He was the most amazing dad. Our family was fortunate to go on so many wonderful vacations and excursions. We Christmased in Hawaii. We stalked Disney characters in Disney World. And we went boogie boarding on Daytona Beach. My dad loved to play in waves. Holy cow. Despite all of these exciting travels, the vacation we reminisce the most about was a 2-week summer vacation we took in an RV around the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. When I was in 3rd grade and my brother was in 1st, our elementary school forgot about all regular social studies topics and taught us exclusively all of the logistics of lighthouses and iron ore boats. For those of you who have traveled here from the Lower Peninsula, this is just normal UPR curriculum. Our education inspired my dad to provide mechanical labor to a friend's motorhome, asking in return to use it for 2 weeks with his family. We followed a circular route around the Upper Peninsula, visiting every oarboat and lighthouse-themed attraction my parents could find. We camped on the shores of Lake Michigan and swam directly under the Mackinac Bridge. We watched my dad read every historical plaque, as he notoriously does. And on a mile-long hike into the Au Lighthouse that felt very long for 2 young kids, my dad made it easier by teaching us how to identify all types of trees based on their needles, bark, and leaf shape. Our life was simple, but it was anything but ordinary. Beyond my brother and myself, there were countless nieces, nephews, cousins, and children of friends that he adored. One of his happiest places was standing at the big brick barbecue that he had built into our deck and watching as all of our family and friends would filter and splash in and out of a pool he had built with his friends about 2 decades ago. He looked forward to the end of the summer when our family came from New York and would visit, when they would come to visit, so that he could spend the week jumping off cliffs into the big lake with my cousins and all of our friends that came out to enjoy the weekend at Lake Superior. He really loved big waves. My cousin Ashley gave our family the first 2 grandbabies, and you knew we were going to have to fight like hell to get to hold one if Uncle John was around. He loved babies, and the way he could soothe them proved that they loved him back. John was the mayor when his niece Chelsea got married, and he was honored beyond belief to help organize and preside over her wedding, a favor he did for many marrying couples, as I heard from a few of you today. Very cool. But hers was the most cherished of them all. For Macy's wedding, he made an incredible multi-level cake, which he took with the same seriousness as everything else he did in his life. Did I mention that my dad is essentially a professional cake maker? That's just a whole nother story. The most valuable lessons I take away from my father are those on friendship and family. He never stopped teaching us how to be a friend. We learned early that the line between friendship and family is frequently blurry, and many of his best friends I knew as uncle before I even realized they weren't related to me through blood. He taught us to leave a phone nearby every night, and when someone calls at 3 a.m., you answer, get out of bed, and you do anything they need. He taught us that if that phone call is, my car broke down in St. Ignace, you prepare yourself for a 3-hour drive and you go to help them. He was known best for his sarcasm and wit. The more he verbally abused you, the more he loved you. I hope that's reassuring for a lot of you. A lot of you. This is just a sidebar, but somebody came over and was playing me the voicemails that my dad had been leaving for them, and they were like, a normal person would be like, wow, why are you grieving this man's death? And I was like, oh, he must have really liked you. If you were lucky enough to be in his inner circle, then you were rock solid. That's what she said. He was the king, what can I say? It was a bet. As I read you these stories and qualities of a dedicated husband, father, friend, man of the community, I'm sure many of you are asking why. Why do I have to be up here right now reading this to you? Why does a man who remarried his wife 3 years ago and continues to fill his house with new St. Bernard puppies and is adored by a community leave us now? Tomorrow would be his 48th birthday. He was claimed by the disease of addiction, a demon he could no longer handle. There is no shame in a problem that does not prejudice against age, race, gender, socioeconomic status, or social standing. There is no reason to hide. My father lived a rich life and gave so much to the world. I truly believe that, the world. It's now time for our community to give back by tackling these issues, and we can only do that by continuing to tell these stories. Oh, my dad, I love him so much. It's just that simple. I love him. I love you, and I miss you. We all love you, and we're going to miss you forever. I only knew I could keep it up here. I could keep it together up here if I ended and closed to you with this tribute. So here we go. Jeremy, or someone's going to hit it for me. I want to hear it. Go, Pack, go! Go, Pack, go! Go, Pack, go! All right, I'm proud of you guys. Thank you so much.
I still remember my first conversation on the phone with John after he won his race for state representative. As you might recall, he pulled off quite the upset. It's because I put the word Sisu on my lawn signs, he said. What's Sisu mean, I asked him. It's a Finnish concept. You know, we got all those Finns up there in the UP. It means strength in the face of adversity. I'm going to fight for my folks. And that's what John did every single day. I got to see that firsthand because I was lucky enough to live with John in Lansing. John bought a little brick house just a few blocks from the Capitol just to stay at during the week when we were in session. He let me, a newcomer from Wayne County, stay there one night when session ran late. 4.5 years later, we were still roommates. I can tell you that John was always working on something for the Upper Peninsula, and John was always telling everybody else about it. In the mornings, I'd be standing in the bathroom in my boxers as John stood outside the door in a full suit, telling me all about the things that he was going to work on that day. And at night, I'd be standing in that same bathroom washing my face as John told me all about the progress that he had made that day. Now, this might come as a surprise, but most politicians in Lansing love to talk about themselves. It is a never-ending, egocentric competition of who's done more, who's seen more, and who's accomplished more. But John was not like that. It was never about him. It was never about his party. It was about doing what he was there to do, bringing results back to the Upper Peninsula. And John didn't care who got the credit. John would take a bill that he himself had written and give it to somebody else if he knew that that bill had a better chance of passing with somebody else's name on it. He would host bipartisan mixers for representatives and senators because he wanted everybody to work together to get things done. He'd bring together coalitions of people and sit them down around our kitchen table just to work them on an issue that he was advocating for at the time. John's leadership and John's commitment to your issues, not his own, led to the formation of what we know today as the UP delegation. The UP delegation changed the game about how you work together to get results in Lansing. The originals, John Kivela, Scott Dianda, Democrats, Ed McBroom and Tom Casperson, Republicans. But the second that they crossed the city line into Lansing, they became John Kivela, Scott Dianda, Ed McBroom, and Tom Casperson, Youpers. That unity and that no-nonsense way of getting things done will be one of the hallmarks of John's legacy, not just for now, but for decades to come. He was a man who was loved and respected by Democrats and Republicans alike for his infinite abilities to cut through all the noise and simply get results. That passion and that commitment to results manifested itself in so many ways. John spearheaded legislation to confront the production and sale of heroin. He brought back millions of dollars in road funding to his district. He was still working on his efforts to connect the Upper and Lower Peninsula onto the same electric grid. He worked with his daughter Shelby on safe nurse-to-patient ratios in our hospitals. He worked to close the dark stores loopholes to make corporations pay their fair share of taxes. Just last month, he stood alongside DHHS workers in Marquette to demand solutions. And just last week, the Michigan House of Representatives was scheduled to vote on chronic wasting disease legislation that John had written. The list goes on and on and on. No speech could possibly contain all of John's accomplishments, all the times that he made a difference, or all the people whose lives he touched. I think that's truly special, and I think it speaks volumes, not just about John's work, but about John's work ethic and his commitment to the Upper Peninsula. John brought the UP to Lansing in a way that only he could. Nights sitting in John's living room, myself, Representative Kozowski, Representative Lavoie, any other representative or senator that we tried to bring over to the House that night, we'd be on a couch or a kitchen chair, and John would be sitting in the big chair in the corner. That was our weekly glimpse into life up here in the Upper Peninsula. And you have to understand that there's just something really cool for those of us living under the bridge about saying Nagani. Our vocabularies and our sense of geography expanded when John came into our lives. For those of us in Southeast Michigan, Schoolcraft was no longer a community college outside Detroit. It was a county in the Upper Peninsula, and we had better not confuse the two. Richmond, home to one of John's dearest friends, State Representative Andrea LaFontaine, was no longer a city in Macomb County. It was a township in Marquette County. The entire legislature learned about Oswald's Bear Farm, Bordock Brewing, the Jacobetti Home for Veterans, Donkers, and so much more. I felt like I had personally known Johnny DePietro for years. Because John was always talking about the man who took his place as mayor. John's Yooper pride was endless. When the North Central Jets won back-to-back-to-back-to-back state championships, we all heard about it. When Northern Michigan University stepped up to the plate to try and provide broadband access across the Upper Peninsula, John beamed with pride as he told everyone about it. He would bring pasties down to eat at the house and to give to others who had never had one before. Inevitably, someone would slip up and call them pasties. Pasties, John would correct, immediately followed by, well, I guess you could eat a pasty too if you're into that sort of thing. Being a husband to Sandy and a father to Shelby and Andrew and making the Upper Peninsula proud was the only thing that mattered to John. Every Monday evening when I got to town, John would be working around the house, fixing some plumbing, repairing a chair rail, ironing his shirts, you name it. I never, ever went to bed Monday night without hearing about Sandy first. John loved you so much, Sandy. Most days he would pull out his phone and he would show me a picture of a hike that you guys had done the weekend before, or those dogs curled up in the big bed. He was so proud when you came to Lansing to advocate for outdoor women. And when he wasn't talking about you, he was talking about your kids. We in Lansing all knew that when John left the Capitol, it wasn't to go home and to shake hands and kiss babies. It was to go home and to be with all of you, like the family man that he was. But when John was in Lansing, he had a job to do, and he was focused, and he was really good at it. And I think that's why it's so hard to understand what happened. And so I wanted to share a little bit about John's struggles with you, and to share the conversation that John and I had the morning that he took his life. People have told me that it's helpful to hear, and I think that in part it's because that we know that we have to talk about it. Talking about this tough stuff is important so that we can heal together. It's important to talk about it to help remove the stigma that keeps people from getting the help that they need. I'm not ashamed to say that John was an alcoholic. We should not be ashamed to say it out loud. Let that be a part of John's legacy, that we talk openly about addiction, that we don't let people suffer in shame and in silence, and that we face it together head on. When John was arrested in 2015, I had no idea he was an alcoholic. I had never seen him drink to excess. He made a huge mistake. But I was so glad when he did the right thing and he told the public, I have a problem and I'm going to seek treatment. Most people would hide from their problems, especially someone in his position. But John advertised it to the world, and everybody in Lansing respected that. I asked John if he really was an alcoholic because I had never seen him drunk before. He said, I'm a functioning alcoholic, David. And one thing that we're good at is keeping secrets. I'm always drinking, you just never know it. And so that day, Representative Lavoie and I went back to the house. We emptied it of any and every ounce of alcohol that we could find. We didn't want there to be any temptations for him. John entered treatment, and I thought things had gotten better. That was 2 years ago. Monday night when I heard that John had been arrested for a second time, I was so mad at him. What if he had hurt someone? What if he had hurt himself? I've heard from other recovering alcoholics that relapse is almost always a part of your recovery. But almost no one has to relapse in the harsh glare of the public eye like John did. John was a state representative. He did not want to disappoint us. I didn't know that John had been bailed out of jail that morning, so when I walked up the stairs on Tuesday to shower, I heard my name. I thought I was hearing voices. I heard my name again, and so I opened his bedroom door. I said, John, what's going on, man? Are you okay? He said, man, I ruined my entire life. I said, John, I know it feels like that now, but this isn't anything that you can't rebound from. In the grand scheme of things, this town, it's nothing. He said, David, I'm going to resign. I'm going home. I'm going to get help. I don't know what it is. When I start, I just cannot stop. He told me how he himself thought he had a serious problem, and that the only people that he was thinking about at that time were his wife and his kids. John told me that he felt like he had let all of you down, in the Upper Peninsula. He felt like he had let down the people who loved him. And so I reminded him that the people who love him are going to love him no matter what. John was putting together a plan of action for leaving Lansing, returning home, and getting his life back in order. I gave him a hug. I said that I loved him. He said that he loved me. But looking back now, I'm so glad that I said it. I feel spoiled to have even had the opportunity. But those were our last words to each other. 4 hours later, when I got the call, I knew what I was going to discover. I walked inside and I learned that John had taken his own life just a few feet from where we hugged that morning. John heard that morning that he was loved. And I don't say that because I was the one who said it. Could have been any one of us standing in that room. So many other people in the legislature, the Speaker of the House, the Lieutenant Governor, everyone reached out there to wrap their arms around John. But I want everyone in this room to know that before John passed, he heard the words, "I love you." Yet within a few hours, John went from having a plan about the next steps to feeling like there was no hope left. I don't understand why he made the decision he did, and I don't think any of us ever will. There is nothing anyone could have done. We cannot play the what-if game. John would not want that. Any time that we spend being angry at John or being angry at ourselves is time wasted that could be spent thinking back on all the memories that we had with him. There were countless memories that we all shared with John. He meant so much to so many of us all across the state. Our colleagues are here from every corner of Michigan, and I want you to see them too. So if you served with John, or currently serve with John, or are from Lansing, I'd like you to stand so that the community can see the love that we had for him in the Capitol. So look at all those people and know that to us, John was this rock star from Marquette. He had a way of going above and beyond to ensure that he could score a win for his district. One of my favorite stories about John is the time that he had the governor visiting his district. He took the governor onto a trail, and people came running by, and people came walking by. "Oh, hello, Representative. Hello, Governor. Oh, hello." They went out to dinner that night, and they sat overlooking the water as people kayaked by. John called out to them. They called out to John, "Hello." John was trying to convince the governor that he needed more funding to promote the already bustling parks and recreations opportunities here in Marquette. And so John decided to stage all those people. The governor fell for it. And so to this day, members of the legislature, we tell that story and we just roll with laughter. None of us, none of the people that you just looked at have ever thought to stage such an elaborate charade just to score a win for our districts. But John did. John did not chase headlines. He didn't tape videos of himself having coffee with folks pretending to be a man of the people. He didn't grandstand just to score a few political points. John drove to Lansing. He put on his suit, he went to work, and he got the job done. He delivered in an almost immeasurable way on behalf of his community. And in the process, John won all of us over. He made mistakes along the way, but we all do. John had his demons, they got the best of him. And so I hope that others will learn from his story and get the help that they need when they need it. I think it's important for everyone in this room to know that the man that you came to love and respect here in Marquette was the same man who walked onto the floor of the Michigan House of Representatives every single day. we as a state are all better for it. My colleagues and I want to thank Sandy, Shelby, and Andrew for sharing John with us. My colleagues and I want to thank Marquette for sending your native son to Lansing to show all of us a better way. I've spoken to my colleagues the last few days, and so I can say with complete confidence, John Kivela was, hands down, one of the most effective and successful legislators that the state of Michigan has ever had in our 180-year history. That is how we're going to remember John in Lansing. We're going to remember him as our friend, as a funny, kind, and gentle person, someone that we will miss dearly, a man who changed all of us, and a man who changed Lansing forever. Thank you.